The distress signal came like a whisper through the void, a faint call carried across light years of cold, dark space. It was a message that no one had expected or understood, yet something about it stirred something deep within the heart of the Earth United Federation. It wasn't a message from any known power, it wasn't a call from any established race in the galaxy. It was a cry for help from somewhere far beyond the reach of civilization, somewhere that had been forgotten by the stars themselves. On Earth, the transmission was barely audible, a crackling distortion of static. But to those who knew how to listen, to those who understood the patterns beneath the noise, there was something more, a hidden urgency that was undeniable. It was a distress call coming from a planet at the edge of known space, a world that had once been a thriving colony, but was now lost to the annals of history, and forgotten by all except for the faintest echoes of its existence. Captain Rhea McCullen stood in the Federation's command room, staring at the flickering hologram of the unknown planet. It was a map of an uncharted system on the far side of the galaxy, one that had never been fully explored, not because it was unreachable, but because no one had ever seen the need to explore it. After all, in the vast expanse of the stars, what was one more forgotten world among so many others? McCullen didn't believe in coincidence. She didn't believe in taking risks without purpose. She knew that whatever lay ahead could be dangerous. The Federation had already heard rumors of pirates lurking near the region, and the galaxy's major factions had been busy dealing with their own territorial disputes. But something in her gut told her that this wasn't just another skirmish. This wasn't just another scrap between warring races. This was something else, something important. The Federation's leadership wasn't convinced. They saw the distress signal as nothing more than an old message, perhaps even a trap set by some enemy to lure explorers into the unknown. But Captain McCullen felt otherwise. Her instincts had served her well throughout her career. They had guided her through countless battles and missions. And in this moment, her instincts screamed that the situation required action. She gathered her crew together on short notice, a diverse group of individuals, each one chosen for their unique skills and experiences. There was Lieutenant Marcus Hayes, a soldier who had seen every form of combat humanity could throw at him, and still emerged unscathed. There was Derlina Sirocco, a brilliant scientist whose knowledge of alien cultures and technology was unmatched. There was Commander Jin Wei, a tactician whose ability to read a battlefield was near legendary, and many others, a mix of people who had all proven their worth in the harshest environments. The Indomitable was prepared for this mission. It was one of Earth's most advanced ships, capable of surviving the harshest conditions and making long-range journeys into the unknown. It was a ship built not just for exploration, but for survival, a ship that could handle whatever the galaxy could throw at it. As the crew boarded and made their final preparations, McCullen stood on the observation deck, watching the stars stretch into endless lines of light beyond the viewport. She could feel the weight of the decision pressing on her shoulders, but she knew what needed to be done. They were about to venture into the dark, to answer a call that no one else had heard, and for better or worse, they were the only ones who could answer it. With a deep breath, she turned to her crew and gave the order to launch, knowing that whatever awaited them on that distant planet would change everything. As the Indomitable cut through the vast emptiness of space toward the unknown system, the crew prepared for what lay ahead. They weren't the usual fleet officers or diplomats representing the Earth United Federation. They weren't the polished faces of intergalactic unity or diplomats eager to broker peace. They were something different. They were an unconventional blend of soldiers, survivors, and outcasts, each one with a story that made them outsiders even among their own kind. But that made them perfect for a mission like this, a mission that would require more than diplomacy or formal orders. It would require guts and determination. Captain Rhea McCullen sat at the head of the command table, reviewing the crew roster again. She had selected each person carefully. Each one had something vital to contribute to the mission despite their unconventional backgrounds. Each had proven themselves in ways that the higher-ups in the Federation had chosen to ignore. They had been chosen not just for their skills, but for their ability to think outside the box, to adapt to the chaos that was sure to come. Lieutenant Marcus Hayes was one of the first to speak during the briefing. His hands rested casually on the table, his eyes sharp, and focused. His reputation as a soldier was well known, but his tendency to break orders and take risks had earned him a reputation among his superiors as a loose cannon. He was the last person anyone would have expected to be part of such a mission, yet here he was eager for whatever lay ahead. His eyes gleamed with a quiet confidence as he leaned forward with a grin on his face. "This isn't going to be your average mission. I can tell that already," he said with a slight chuckle. "But I'll tell you one thing, whatever happens, we'll get the job done." Terlina Sirocco adjusted her glasses and added in her calm, analytical voice, "We don't know what we're walking into out there. This could be an ancient colony, or it could be the remnants of something far more dangerous. We need to stay alert. We don't have the luxury of making mistakes." Her knowledge of alien technology and archaeology was unmatched. Her understanding of lost civilizations had been the key to deciphering many of the galaxy's mysteries, but the Federation had always regarded her as too eccentric, too focused on theoretical knowledge to be useful on the front lines of exploration. Her expertise had often been dismissed as impractical. She had been sent to the mission because her name had come up in the review process. But McCullen knew better. She had read the reports and understood that Sirocco was one of the few who could uncover the truth behind the signal. Commander Jinwei was quiet as usual, his eyes scanning the crew's faces with the precision of a man who had spent years calculating every possible outcome before making a decision. Jinwei's reputation as a tactician had earned him respect throughout the fleet, but it had also made him a solitary figure. Not many could match his intellect or his ability to read any situation before it unfolded. The Federation often thought of him as a cold strategist, incapable of understanding the human element, but McCullen knew that Jinwei's mind would be invaluable in navigating the political and military complexities they were sure to encounter. The rest of the crew was a mix of engineers, analysts, and survival experts who had all seen their share of danger, each one with a personal history that made them uniquely qualified for the mission. They weren't here for glory or recognition. They were here because they believed in the mission. They believed that humanity had the strength to face whatever challenges the galaxy could throw at them. As the ship continued its journey toward the distant system, McCullen knew that her crew's differences were their greatest strength. They weren't just following orders, they were choosing to fight for something larger than themselves. They were united by one common belief: humanity's place in the stars was yet to be defined, and they would be the ones to shape that future. With the crew in position, McCullen stood at the command center, ready for what lay ahead. The stars outside the viewport stretched into the infinite void, and for the first time in a long while she felt a sense of purpose settling within her. This mission wasn't about politics or diplomacy. It was about something far more personal, and she was ready to face whatever challenges awaited them on that distant world. As the Indomitable neared the unknown planet, the crew's tension was palpable. Each member knew that they were venturing into uncharted territory, and no one could say for certain what awaited them below. The planet loomed large through the viewports, its surface a patchwork of jagged mountains and sprawling ruined cities, a place where time itself seemed to have forgotten its passing. The once thriving colony, now nothing more than a ghost world, abandoned by those who had once called it home. But the distress signal had come from here, and it was their job to uncover the truth, no matter what that truth might be. Captain McCullen stood at the helm, her eyes locked on the planet's surface, the faint outlines of ancient structures barely visible against the fading light of the distant sun. She knew there was something more beneath this silence, something that the galaxy's larger powers had missed, but that they had to uncover now. As the ship's engines hummed with the rhythmic pulse of the Indomitable cutting through space, she turned to her crew and gave the command to land. The landing was smooth, but unsettling. The planet's atmosphere was thick with dust, and the air had a strange metallic taste to it, as though the world itself was slowly decaying. The ship touched down in the midst of what had once been a bustling city, a city now reduced to crumbling ruins. The buildings stretched high into the air, their once pristine surfaces now scarred by years of neglect and decay. No signs of life anywhere. The ground was littered with debris, twisted metal, and shattered stone. McCullen led her team out of the ship onto the barren landscape. The air was thick and heavy. Each breath felt like it weighed more than the last. The team moved cautiously through the ruins, scanning for any signs of life or activity. But the silence was overwhelming. Not even the wind stirred as they made their way deeper into the city's heart. Sirocco moved forward with purpose, her eyes scanning the walls of the ancient structures, her fingers brushing lightly against the surface of the stone. She muttered to herself about the architecture, the design unfamiliar yet oddly resonant with some of the more obscure cultures she had studied in the past. It was a language she couldn't fully understand, but it was clear that something had happened here, something that had changed the course of this planet's history. "What do you think happened here?" Lieutenant Hayes asked as he surveyed the area, his weapon slung loosely across his shoulder, his eyes darting between the buildings and the surrounding ruins. Sirocco paused for a moment before responding. "I'm not sure, but whatever it wasn't just a natural disaster. This world didn't die from neglect. It died from something much more catastrophic. There's too much evidence of intentional destruction here, something where someone went to great lengths to erase this civilization." Commander Jinwei had been quiet up until now, his eyes narrowed as he studied the surrounding area, his tactical mind always working, trying to piece together the puzzle that lay before them. "There's no sign of an evacuation or a mass exodus," he said. "If the inhabitants fled, they would have left something behind, something tangible. But there's nothing. Everything is too clean, too perfect in its destruction." The crew moved deeper into the heart of the ruined city, their footsteps echoing in the eerie silence, their scanners picking up faint traces of unusual energy readings, but nothing definitive. It was as if the planet itself was hiding its secrets from them. Suddenly, as they rounded a corner, McCullen raised a hand, signaling for the team to stop. In front of them was an enormous structure half buried in rubble. It was a building unlike any they had seen before, its design alien and intricate, its surface etched with patterns that none of them recognized. And at the center of it all was a massive door sealed shut. But there was something more. It was as if the door was waiting for them to open it, beckoning them closer. McCullen looked at her crew, her voice steady, but with a hint of urgency. "This is it. Whatever is left of this planet's past is behind that door. We need to get inside." But as she reached for the door's control panel, a strange hum filled the air, a low vibrating sound that seemed to come from the very depths of the planet itself. The ground trembled and the sky above darkened, as if warning them that something ancient was awakening deep within the planet's core. And in that moment they all knew that their arrival had not gone unnoticed. The hum grew louder, vibrating through the ground beneath their feet, and the indomitable crew froze, senses sharpened. Captain McCullen took a step forward, her gaze fixed on the massive door before her, but her instincts told her to be cautious. The vibrations weren't just from the planet. They were coming from something deep within, something ancient, something alive. She motioned for the crew to stay alert as the hum intensified, almost as if it were calling them forward. Suddenly, the door's control panel flickered to life, its ancient mechanisms sparking as they came to life with a low mechanical whine. The door slowly began to slide open with an eerie hiss. Beyond it, the darkness was impenetrable, stretching into the heart of the alien structure. Yet something beyond seemed to pull them in, beckoning them into the unknown. "Stay sharp," McCullen ordered, her voice calm but firm. She gestured for Dr. Sirocco to step forward, knowing her expertise with alien technology might be their only hope in deciphering what lay ahead. The scientist stepped up, quickly examining the control panel. "This isn't just ancient technology," Dr. Sirocco murmured, her voice tinged with awe. "This is something beyond anything we've seen, a system far more advanced than anything we could imagine." As the door fully opened, a flash of cold air rushed out, and with it came the unmistakable scent of something forgotten, a hint of old decay mixed with ozone. The darkness within felt oppressive, as if the very air itself was thick with history, waiting to reveal its secrets. Just as McCullen was about to give the order to move inside, the ground beneath them shook again. But this time, it wasn't the planet. The source was above, and it was approaching fast. In the distance, figures appeared from the shadows, moving with the precision and grace of trained warriors. Their appearance sent a chill through the crew. They were tall, their bodies clad in dark, form-fitting armor that shimmered with an unnatural gleam. Their faces were obscured by helmets, but their posture radiated authority and power. "They're here," McCullen muttered under her breath, her hand instinctively reaching for her weapon. "We've been noticed." The figures moved swiftly toward them, their steps synchronized. As they drew closer, it became clear that these weren't ordinary mercenaries or hostile forces. These beings radiated a quiet strength, a presence that commanded respect. Their armor was unlike anything the humans had seen, a combination of sleek material and intricate markings that seemed to pulse with energy. There was no mistaking it. They were not here to negotiate. One of the figures, taller than the rest and with an air of authority, stepped forward. He removed his helmet, revealing a face that was both human and alien. His skin was pale, almost translucent, with faint patterns running across his features, and his eyes gleamed with an ancient, calculating intelligence. "I am Karthek, leader of the Xalfar," he spoke, his voice a low, commanding rumble. "You have no business here. Leave now, or face the consequences." The crew tensed, unsure of how to respond. They had never encountered the Xalfar before, but the stories of their military prowess and their unyielding defense of their homeworlds had reached Earth's distant colonies. The Xalfar were a species feared across the galaxy, known for their brutal tactics and no-nonsense approach to any perceived threat. Captain McCullen stepped forward, her calm gaze meeting Karthak's, unflinching. "We've come to help," she said, her tone unwavering. "We were sent to investigate the distress signal. We're not here to take anything or fight. We only want to understand what's happening here." Karthak's eyes narrowed, studying her with suspicion. "Help. You have no idea what you're dealing with. This planet is under our protection, and its secrets are not for your kind to uncover." Dr. Sirocco spoke up, her voice trembling slightly with both fear and fascination. "We don't want to steal anything from you. We need to know what happened here. This planet is ancient, and something is awakening within it. If we don't figure this out, there could be consequences far worse than anything you can imagine." Karthak remained silent for a long moment, his eyes scanning the crew as if weighing their every word. Finally, he spoke again, his voice cold and hard. "You may not have a choice in the matter. The secrets of this world are tied to something far older than even my people. If you choose to delve deeper, you will awaken powers that will not care whether you are friend or foe. But I will allow you to enter, but only under my watch. We may have to work together, whether we like it or not." McCullen nodded, her decision made. "Understood. We're in this together, then." And so, the unlikely alliance between the Earth crew and the Xalfar was formed. Two groups of vastly different origins united by necessity. But the uneasy tension between them was clear. They might be allies for now, but trust would take far longer to build. And time, they all knew, was running out. The uneasy alliance between the humans and the Xalfar held firm, but the air was thick with tension as they moved deeper into the ancient structure. Every corner they turned, every passage they entered, felt like an intrusion into something sacred, something long forgotten. The hum that had echoed through the planet's surface seemed to reverberate more loudly now, the walls themselves seeming to pulse with energy. They weren't alone. Whatever lay beneath the surface of this planet was beginning to stir, and the crew knew it was only a matter of time before the true nature of the threat revealed itself. Karthak, the Xalfar leader, walked at the front, his heavy boots echoing on the stone floor. His eyes remained fixed ahead, though McCullen could sense his every move was calculated, his mind always 5 steps ahead of the rest. He had agreed to let the humans join the expedition, but it was clear he still regarded them as little more than distractions. For all their cooperation, McCullen couldn't shake the feeling that the Xalfar had their own agenda, one that might not align with humanity's. "We are getting closer," Karthak said suddenly, his voice low. "I can feel it. The weapon is near." "Weapons don't have feelings," Lieutenant Hayes muttered under his breath. But McCullen shot him a warning glance. They were allies for now, but they had no idea what they were walking into. Dr. Sirocco, who had been quietly studying the walls and the strange alien symbols etched into them, looked up. "It's not just a weapon, is it? There's something more, something tied to the very fabric of this planet. This structure was built to protect something, but it's also built to contain it. This weapon isn't just a weapon. It's a force that could reshape everything." McCullen glanced at her, her mind racing. The gravity of their mission weighed heavily on her. Whatever they were about to uncover could alter the fate of the galaxy, and not just the balance of power, something deeper. They weren't walking into just another ancient ruin. They were walking into something that could change the entire understanding of the universe itself. Their path led them to an enormous chamber, its walls lined with glowing glyphs. The air was thick with the sense of foreboding, and McCullen could feel the presence of something ancient, something powerful. At the center of the chamber, perched upon an altar, was a massive stone relic, its surface adorned with more of the cryptic symbols that seemed to shift and change before their eyes. It was unmistakable. This was it, the weapon, or whatever it had once been. The Xalfar leader, Karthak, stepped forward, his posture tense. "This is what we've been protecting for centuries," he said, his voice almost reverent. "It's not just a weapon. It's a force capable of changing the fundamental laws of the galaxy itself. It can create or destroy, shape realities, and even manipulate time. That's why we've kept it hidden." McCullen stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the relic. "But why keep it hidden? Why not destroy it?" The Xalfar have always believed that the galaxy isn't ready to understand the true power of this artifact. Karthak explained, his voice harsh. "We keep it locked away to prevent the chaos that would follow if anyone were to misuse it. But we can't keep it forever." At that moment, a sudden loud crash echoed from the entrance, followed by the unmistakable sound of armored footsteps. The crew spun around, weapons raised, to find a group of mercenaries clad in dark, battle-worn armor charging toward them. They had arrived. Another group had come to claim the weapon. "We were hoping you'd find it," a voice rang out from the leader of the mercenaries, a tall, imposing figure with glowing red eyes. "We've been tracking this planet for months. And now, we'll take what's ours." The mercenaries surged forward, weapons raised. The Xalfar moved quickly into position, their precision evident, but they were clearly outnumbered. The humans, too, readied themselves. Lieutenant Hayes took a step forward, his eyes narrowing with determination. "Looks like we got company," Hayes said, cracking his knuckles. "Let's show them what Earth's got." Two sides clashed with a ferocity that reverberated throughout the chamber. The Xalfar, with their impeccable battle tactics, moved with ruthless efficiency, while the humans relied on their adaptability and sheer ingenuity. McCullen moved through the chaos, her eyes fixed on the relic, knowing that the only way to stop the mercenaries from getting it was to act fast. But the mercenaries had a trick up their sleeve. As the battle raged on, one of their operatives, a tech specialist, bypassed the chamber's security systems and triggered a sequence of events that sent tremors throughout the room. The relic began to glow brightly, its energy pulsing like a heartbeat. The ground shook violently, and the walls trembled. "Get to the relic. Now," McCullen shouted. It was a race against time now. The mercenaries were closing in on the artifact, but the power surging from it was beyond anything any of them had anticipated. The battle wasn't just for control of the weapon. It was a race to see who would survive its awakening. The stakes had never been higher. The battle raged in the ancient chamber, the air thick with the sound of weapons clashing and energy blasts, lighting up the darkened space. Captain McCullen's pulse raced as she dove behind a column for cover, her eyes flicking to the center of the room where the relic pulsed with an otherworldly glow. The energy from it surged, becoming more volatile with each passing second. She could feel the ground tremble beneath her feet, as if the planet itself was awakening to the chaos they had unleashed. "McCullen, we need to stop them." Dr. Sirocco's voice rang out, her words barely audible over the noise of the skirmish. She was crouched near the far wall, her face pale as she stared at the relic. If they trigger whatever's inside that thing, it'll be catastrophic. McCullen's eyes darted to the relic. She could see the mercenaries closing in on it, their tech specialist already fiddling with the control panel embedded in the stone altar, his movements fast and precise. The glowing symbols on the relic flickered, shifting like they were alive, and the energy in the room felt like it was about to boil over. "We have no time," McCullen shouted. "Hayes, cover the Xalfar while we get to that relic. Sirocco, get a read on that energy." Without waiting for confirmation, she turned and sprinted toward the center of the room, her heart pounding in her chest. She could see the Xalfar fighting with brutal efficiency, cutting through the mercenaries with ruthless precision, but they were losing ground. Their numbers were fewer, and every moment spent fighting only brought the mercenaries closer to the artifact. Lieutenant Hayes was already in motion, blasting his way through a group of mercenaries with his usual ferocity. He moved like a whirlwind, his gun firing in rapid succession as he created a path for McCullen and Sirocco to reach the relic. Dr. Sirocco wasn't far behind, her eyes glued to a handheld device that displayed the increasing energy readings from the artifact. "It's not just a weapon," she muttered to herself, her voice filled with awe and terror. "It's a power source, a conduit for something far more dangerous than we realized. If they power it up completely, it could tear the fabric of space itself." McCullen reached the relic just as the mercenaries were closing in. She raised her weapon, taking aim at the mercenary tech specialist, who was too focused on his task to notice her approach. In one fluid motion, she fired, and the specialist dropped, his hand still twitching over the panel. But the damage had been done. The energy from the relic spiked violently, and the chamber was flooded with an intense, blinding light. For a moment, everything stopped. The fighting, the noise, even the trembling of the ground. The relic glowed brighter than ever, its energy surging like an unstoppable tide. McCullen felt her skin tingle, her mind overwhelmed by the sheer force of the power being released. It wasn't just in the room anymore. The energy had spread outward, seeping into the very bones of the planet itself. The Xalfar leader, Karthak, staggered forward, his voice hoarse, as he shouted over the rising hum. "It's opening. It's releasing everything that's been sealed inside for millennia." Suddenly, the walls of the chamber began to shift. The floor cracked beneath their feet, and strange, glowing symbols appeared, floating above them like phantoms of an ancient past. The mercenaries, too, were paralyzed by the overwhelming force, their eyes wide with fear as they dropped their weapons and began backing away. Then, from the center of the room, a massive shape began to form, an entity, vast and unknowable, taking shape in the heart of the energy storm. It was as if the relic had summoned something ancient, something primordial, a being that had been trapped for eons. Its eyes were pools of dark energy, its form shifting and warping like liquid. "No," Karthak whispered, his voice filled with terror. "This is the thing we were meant to contain, the Xalfar prison." The entity's eyes turned toward them, and its voice was not heard but felt, a deep, resonant force that shook them to their core. "Who dares awaken me?" The voice was like a thunderclap in their minds. "The time has come. Time has ended." McCullen's heart raced. She knew they had awakened something they could not control, something far beyond their understanding. The mercenaries had thought they could claim the relic for power, but it was clear now that no one could contain the being they had unleashed. The ground split beneath them as the entity began to rise, its form stretching and twisting like a nightmare taking shape. The chamber began to collapse around them, and the crew was forced to run. "Get to the ship," McCullen screamed. "Now." The Xalfar and humans alike scrambled toward the exit as the ancient prison began to shatter, the force of its release shaking the very foundation of the planet. The entity had awakened, and there was no turning back. The only chance they had now was to escape, and pray they could stop it before it was too late. The earth groaned beneath them, and the air itself seemed to ripple with the dark energy that poured forth from the relic. McCullen's pulse hammered in her ears as she sprinted toward the exit, her eyes scanning frantically for the rest of her crew. Behind her, the ground cracked wide open, and the room began to collapse in on itself. Dust and rubble rained down, and the ancient structure seemed to breathe with a life of its own, a giant quartz shaking off the weight of eons. "Move," she shouted, her voice barely audible over the sound of crumbling stone and shifting earth. Hayes, always the first to act in a crisis, was already at the front, leading the charge toward the exit. His face was a grim mask of determination as he fired a few warning shots at the last of the mercenaries, who had already started retreating. They had no intention of sticking around for whatever nightmare the relic had unleashed, and neither did McCullen. The only difference was that they were running from the storm. She and her crew were heading directly into it. As they neared the exit, Carthack was at their side, his usually stoic face now contorted with anger and fear. His eyes flickered back toward the collapsing structure, a look of disbelief settling into his features. "We were supposed to contain it," he muttered, the words lost in the rumble of the dying world around them. "We were never meant to release it." "What is that thing?" McCullen demanded as they raced through the twisting hallways, narrowly avoiding falling debris. Carthack's voice was low, regretful. The Xalfar called it the Watcher. An ancient entity, older than any of our kind. It was sealed away for a reason. It is not just a weapon. It was the power behind the cataclysms that shattered entire civilizations. Its presence here means the end of all things. It exists to erase history. "Great," Hayes said with a dark laugh. "So we've unleashed a walking apocalypse. We've got to stop it, or we're all dead," McCullen snapped, cutting him off as they reached the massive doors leading to the surface. Just as she stepped through the threshold, a violent tremor nearly knocked her off her feet. The sky above was darkening, swirling with unnatural clouds that seemed to pulse with the same dark energy that filled the chamber below. Outside, the landscape had changed. Where the city had once stood, only ruin remained, crumbling buildings and blackened earth, as though the very life had been sucked out of the world. The distant horizon was alive with energy, crackling like a storm ready to break. The Watcher's influence spread like a malignant force, poisoning everything in its path. "We have to get back to the Indomitable," McCullen shouted over the chaos, but her voice faltered as she realized the true scope of the disaster. The planet wasn't just dying. It was being consumed from the inside out. The Watcher was a force of destruction, and it was awake. As the crew stumbled toward their ship, the ground began to tremble violently again, and McCullen could see flashes of light in the distance, massive shockwaves rippling across the planet's surface as the Watcher expanded its influence. If they didn't leave soon, they would be caught in the wake of its devastation. But before they could reach the ship, a dark shape appeared in the sky above them, blotting out the dying sun. The Watcher, or perhaps something else born of its power, descended toward them with terrifying speed, its form a black mass of shifting tendrils and shadow. Carthack cursed under his breath, his hand going to his weapon. "We can't outrun it. We must fight." "No time," McCullen shouted, urgency bleeding into her voice. "Get to the ship. We need to leave now." They were nearly at the landing site when another shockwave hit, sending them tumbling across the cracked ground. McCullen scrambled to her feet, her body aching, but she didn't look back. She couldn't. The Watcher was coming, and the only thing that mattered was getting to the ship before it was too late. They made it to the Indomitable with seconds to spare, the ship's hatch sliding open just as the ground beneath them cracked wide open. The mercenaries who had survived the collapse were already scrambling aboard their own ships, abandoning the planet as the storm of destruction drew closer. "Lift off," McCullen commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos as the crew scrambled inside the ship. The engines roared to life, and the Indomitable shot into the air, leaving the dying world behind. But as they ascended, McCullen couldn't shake the feeling that they hadn't escaped yet. The Watcher's presence loomed in the distance, the sky darkening as if the very stars were retreating from its wake. "Captain, look," Hayes said, pointing toward the horizon. McCullen's eyes followed his gaze and felt her heart sink. The Watcher, now towering above the planet like a shadow of death, was no longer just a part of the world. It was a force of nature, and it was coming for them. The Indomitable shot through space, its engines straining as it pushed through the thinning atmosphere of the dying planet. The viewports shook with every tremor from the planet below, and McCullen's grip tightened on the helm. She watched through the glass as the dark storm of energy engulfed the planet's surface, the swirling mass of destruction spreading outward like an unstoppable wave. "We're not out of the woods yet," Lieutenant Hayes muttered as he scanned the sensor readings. "That thing is still coming for us." McCullen nodded grimly. The Watcher, now fully unleashed, was no longer confined to the surface of the planet. It had extended its reach into the very fabric of space, and its presence was undeniable. A growing shadow was following them, an endless churning cloud that seemed to warp the very space around it, distorting time and space in a way that felt unnatural. "Can we outrun it?" McCullen asked, her voice sharp with urgency. Karthak, standing near the back of the ship, his eyes dark with the weight of his people's failure, spoke with a gravely quiet tone. "No, the Watcher is not bound by conventional means. It is a being of pure energy. It has no need for propulsion, no need for gravity. It will follow us across the stars if we don't stop it." Dr. Sirocco, her face pale, looked up from her console, her hands trembling. "It's worse than we thought. The Watcher is using the energy it absorbed from the relic to tear holes in space-time. It's bending reality itself. If we don't stop it now, it could spread throughout the galaxy. There won't be anywhere safe." "Then we have no choice," McCullen said, her voice hard. "We have to stop it here and now." Hayes looked over at her, his expression serious. "And how do we do that? The ship's weapons are a joke against that thing. We can't even get close enough to attack it. It's got the entire planet's energy coursing through it." McCullen's mind raced. There had to be a way. The Watcher was not just a destructive force. It was a relic, a piece of a long-lost civilization that had been sealed away for a reason. If the Xalthar had protected it for so long, there must have been something they knew about it, some weakness they hadn't revealed. She turned to Karthak, her voice steady but demanding. "Karthak, your people sealed this entity away for a reason. You have to know something about how to stop it. What do we do?" Karthak's eyes met hers, and for a moment, he seemed almost broken, lost in the weight of his failure. But then something flickered in his gaze, a hint of resolve. He stepped forward, his voice low but resolute. "There is a way," he said, "but it will cost us. The Watcher draws its power from the core of the planet. It feeds off energy, and the relic is the conduit. The only way to stop it is to sever that connection. We must destroy the relic and its source. That will sever the Watcher's link to this dimension." McCullen nodded, her heart pounding. "How do we do that?" Karthak pointed toward the coordinates on the ship's map, where a faint signal from the planet still flickered in the distance. "There is a weapons station in orbit around the planet. An ancient defense system my people built when they first sealed the Watcher away. If we can get close enough, we can use its weapon to destabilize the relic's energy field. It will cut off the Watcher's power source and hopefully banish it back to the void." "And if we can't?" Hayes asked, his voice tight. "Then it will destroy everything," Karthak replied grimly, "including us." The decision was made in an instant. They had no other choice. They couldn't outrun the Watcher, and they couldn't hope to contain it. If they were to survive, they had to destroy the relic and end the entity's reign of destruction. The Indomitable swerved into the deep void, heading for the distant weapons station that orbited the planet. The ship's engines roared as they pushed through the star-filled expanse, the looming presence of the Watcher still hot on their tail, a dark void threatening to swallow them whole. As they drew closer to the weapons station, a wave of energy rippled through the ship, knocking them off course. The Watcher wasn't just following. It was attacking, its presence warping space itself in an attempt to stop them. "We've got to hurry," Dr. Sirocco screamed, her fingers flying over the console as she tried to regain control of the ship. The Indomitable shuddered, but McCullen kept her focus. The weapons station loomed ahead, its massive structure finally within reach. But the Watcher was closing in. "Take us in, now," McCullen commanded, her voice hard as steel. With a final burst of speed, they entered the station's orbit, and the ship's weapon systems began to power up, locking onto the relic's energy source below. The Watcher's presence grew stronger, its massive tendrils of energy reaching toward them like an insatiable maw. "Ready," Sirocco called out, her face bathed in the glow of the targeting system. The ship shuddered again as the weapon fired. A massive beam of concentrated energy shot toward the relic's core, and for a split second, time seemed to slow. The blast hit, and the relic trembled violently, its energy field sparking and cracking. A shockwave of raw power rippled outward, and then everything went dark. For a moment, no one knew if they had succeeded or failed. The ship floated in eerie silence, the only sound the labored breaths of the crew. And then, slowly, the darkness began to lift. The Watcher's presence faded, the void it had cast on the galaxy dissipating, as if it had never existed. They had done it. The galaxy was safe. For now.